and here's the good news, Rick. Like the good news, and according to the article, this is the good news, is that
Okay.
if you are seeing new people and your church is growing, that momentum is going to continue.
Okay.
So that's what Carrie says, is that
Yeah.
churches that are gaining momentum are going to continue to gain momentum. Churches that are losing momentum are going to continue to lose momentum.
Yeah.
And so that's super interesting. He's just saying like stability is
Yeah.
just not a thing. It's either you're going to go one way or the other.
So yeah, I got it. It's like it's bad news or good news. It's not no news. It's not a
there's no
nothing
gray.
burger. Right. Yeah. Got it. I'm with you. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fireside Chat, a production of Allen Creek Community Church, or AC3 as we like to call ourselves. In today's discussion, we want to dive deeply into a topic of concern for disciples of Jesus or for those who are investigating faith in Christ, so we can chart a path of faithfulness in a world of uncertainty. To that end, we hope this conversation sparks your interest and your learning. If you want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe, and we look forward to reading your comments below and getting your take. Now, let's begin. Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode. Don't know the number, Alex.
We have no idea what the number is.
This episode of the Fireside Chat. And so here it is. There's a fire right here. It's digital. So therefore, it's actually virtual heat is being...
Oh, it's being to them?
Yeah. Virtual heat is being communicated to us and to everybody.
That's awesome.
Anyhow, so hopefully we'll raise more light than heat with this conversation we're going to have. So this is an interesting article that you sent me by Carrie Newhoff, pastor, church leader from Canada.
Oh, Canada, eh?
Canada, eh? And he is now a pastor emeritus and sort of leadership guy. This is an interesting article because he says, okay, basically we've come out of a whole season of chaos for churches that came out of the COVID thing, and it was just constant. You remember this, right? We were changing every week. We were doing something different
Throw it,
standards. Yeah. And so because we were getting different restrictions and requirements, and we were punting on all sorts of things, we didn't know what was happening. But now he says sort of it's kind of stabilized, and now we can look to the future. And so when he does this, Alex, he's got 7 trends that are going to kind of define the future. So walk us through that a little bit, and then let's talk about it.
Well, what's funny is you just said stable.
Yeah.
And the first trend is that the stable church has become an endangered species.
Yeah. So what does he mean by that?
Yeah. So basically what he's saying is that, and we all kind of go back to COVID. So prior to COVID, there was this kind of idea that the church was pretty solid. It was stable. Like your church was not going to go under. It was, you would show up on Sunday. You had the same experience. You knew what you were walking into, and it was a stable environment. And that's just not the case anymore. It's just not. You're constantly either getting new people or you're constantly losing people. There is no stability with
And I would say that that's sort of played out at AC3 a little bit, like in good and bad ways. In some bad ways, let's say, I'll put that in quotation marks because I'm trusting God in all of the shifting. But there's been such a destabilization nationally where we've seen people pick up and just leave, and they've left not just our church. Some just did that because of some of the relational chaos, and you think that person would never.
Yeah.
Like we considered, you consider them just walking buddies. Like we got through the wars together, man. And prior to COVID.
Yeah.
And so why would this thing cause? It really. It surprised me how unbelievably mobile suddenly everything was. People could get up, leave congregations, but then also just get up and leave states.
Yeah.
The transience of Americans became
just moving.
Right. So I agree with that. We saw everything be very different. Now, I would say on the positive side of things, it's unbelievable how many new people we're seeing at church these days.
Right.
Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah,
like,
100%.
Anecdotally, we're just seeing so many. Like, every church probably sees somebody new that walks in every week, but literally we are seeing 2 or 3 families, individuals coming through that are just investigating in that mode, or they are church shopping or whatever. But the idea that we're just the same 150 people from here to eternity is not a reality.
Well, and here's the good news, Rick. Like the good news, and according to the article, this is the good news, is that if you are seeing new people and your church is growing, that momentum is going to continue.
Okay.
So that's what Carrie says, is that churches that are gaining momentum are going to continue to gain momentum. Churches that are losing momentum are going to continue to lose momentum.
Yeah.
And so that's super interesting. He's just saying like stability is just not a thing. It's either you're going to go one way or the other.
So yeah, I got it. It's like it's bad news or good news. It's not no news. It's not a
there's no
nothing
gray.
burger, right? Yeah, got it. I'm with you.
So that's super interesting.
Yeah.
And an interesting take he has. But what's interesting is the second trend, and I think this is probably the most impactful for me. And we just had a generations series that was really good, really well done. And we just talked about the different generations. And I actually recently sent you a podcast about why Gen Z doesn't care what you think.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And so this is the number 2 is that millennials are now the core of your church.
Yeah.
And I
so
think,
why is this a mind-blowing thought?
Like, why is this a mind-blowing thought? It's because a lot of pastors have looked, and I'm a millennial, but a lot of pastors have missed that these are now your core members. Like when we say millennial, we're not talking to the 20-somethings.
Exactly.
We're actually talking to the 30 and 40-somethings.
Yeah.
Probably the core tithers of your church.
Yes.
And so
that's unbelievably important, because if you just say millennial to someone my age, 56, full disclosure, for almost 20 years of a window of my life, millennials equaled young people.
Sure, 100%.
Right? So now you can't just switch gears and keep using the term millennial to be synonymous with young people, because it no longer means it's middle-aged people. They're 40-year-old millennials. The oldest millennials are about
44-ish.
44-ish.
Yeah.
So right.
The creator of OpenAI is a millennial.
They're going to be the core contributors to your church, both in terms of volunteer energy, horsepower, attendance, and giving.
Hopefully giving as well. And this is huge, because that means that things are shifting. You know, and that's the stability thing. If millennials are your core, that means things are going to be different.
Yeah.
Than if, the Xers are your core or the Boomers are your core. There's going to be a difference. And really, in the article, he kind of sweeps over the Xers, even though he is one. So,
dang it! I am so tired of being.
They're constantly forgotten. The Xers are constantly forgotten.
We got a perpetual inferiority complex. We live in the shadow of the Boomers and the Millennials. We're like a mouse in an elephant cage. And there's 2 elephants, and we're one mouse. It's like the Boomers over here and the Millennials over here.
Well, and this is pretty cool. So he says in the article that millennials have embraced church attendance faster than any other demographic, surpassing their attendance levels back in 2019.
Okay, so does he mean re-embracing? Because I read that. The fascinating thought to me, or the question, I guess, is that we're also in the midst of the great de-churching.
Yeah.
So how does it map? How does the great de-churching map to this? Millennials, can you tell some about that?
Yeah, so what, of course, what this means is that boomers aren't coming back. So that's what's happening, is that they're reintegrating. Millennials are the fastest to reintegrate.
After the great de-churching.
After the great de-churching, boomers are not coming back.
Whoa.
And that's super interesting, right?
Very interesting.
Because for the longest time in church world, we were like, oh, they're solid. The boomer generation, they are solid.
Well, they were more churched.
Yeah.
They were part of a American milieu where Christianity was more at the cultural center.
Yeah, and we constantly think, oh, millennials, young people hate church. So
right.
Like we're just like in that mindset. But in reality, that's not the case.
Well, okay, what's fascinating about that, so another sort of thing that dovetails with this, Scott Taylor, one of our elders, just sent me an article today, and the elders were reviewing it, and it was talking about the Catholic Church and saying that the trend in the Catholic Church was that they experienced the same de-churching, and it was basically post-sexual revolution, post-1960s, and it was a lot of that was led by people who are today 80-year-old, 70-year-old priests who were children of the revolution a little bit, and they were very laissez-faire about Catholic doctrine. They were laissez-faire about Catholic moral standards, especially as it related to marriage and sex and abortion. And so they're off-ramping, like you're talking about with the boomers. And what's coming up behind them is they're saying a cadre of much, much younger and much, much more conservative priests. So as the millennials are backfilling from these boomer priests that are off-ramping, they're finding, the Catholic Church is finding, they have more fidelity to traditional church doctrine and church moral stances, and they're just generally want to connect more with the past.
Nice.
Fascinating, right? Because the boomers were wanting to get what was next. They wanted the future of the church.
Let's just go.
Yeah, and it
get
came out of
more
Vatican II. As a grew up Catholic, I don't know if that was in your consciousness, but Vatican II was like, let's update the church.
Yeah.
Let's get it out of the masses in Latin, and let's have guitar-driven mass, and let's be the cool vicar instead of the stuffy, priest. So that was the trend for the last 40 years, and it's fascinating, I think, confirming this, that the millennial influence is drawing the church back to its ancientness.
I think so. I think
And
there's
a hunger for transcendence.
I was about to say that. I think there's a hunger for transcendence within the millennial generation. And one of the things I will say is that, and it's noted in this article, is that the boomers aren't necessarily leaving the church, but they're retiring from physical church.
Interesting. And is some of that health, or what are we talking about
So
there?
I think what we're saying is they enjoy their cup of coffee on the couch while
Got
they
it.
watch church.
So they got really, they immediately adapted to online
Yeah.
church really, really quick. And I would say that we got a group of men that used to meet physically in our building every Wednesday morning, and they were all in their retirement age, and now they are faithful. They are Zoom
faithful.
Zoom faithful, and they meet, and they are doing good community. I mean,
Yeah.
so where there's health concerns or whatever, they meet with each other. They're sharing life, and they're doing great community. But they got used to online church and
Yeah.
online community
Yeah.
right away, and they're all over 70.
What's super interesting is, you look at the millennials and they were born in the internet,
Yep.
or they were growing up with the internet, and they're the ones that say,
Too much.
I need this.
Yep.
I
Let's
need
put a cap on
physical
that. Yep.
connection. So
Yeah.
I found that super, super interesting. That was one of the things that they would say is,
The millennials are driving your
yeah,
church.
it's
Yeah.
a
And-
big deal.
and so get used to it, because how are they going to be different, right?
Yeah, how are they gonna
than
be different?
Boomers, right?
And I think part of that,
Boomers more brand loyalty, probably.
maybe.
Millennials will have more mobility, or they'll demand more choice. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, what I think the church might miss out on is if your church does not empower millennials,
Mm.
they will leave.
Mm.
They want to be a part of something.
Yeah.
They want to, similar to Gen Z,
Yep.
they want buy-in,
Yep.
but they want to be a part of it.
So that's where that activistic strain
yeah.
that has been inculcated in them is going to really show up.
Yeah, they want to be ingrained in the culture, and they want to be a part of it, and they want their ideas to be heard and listened to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you just go, you don't know anything, you're a young millennial.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, I'm 30, I'm 40 years old.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. They're
Right.
going to go to the place that wants their input
Yep.
and wants their their talents and
Right.
their,
Right.
and their gifting. So I think that's the big thing I would say about millennials being the core of your church is that if you've already missed out on the fact that they are, when they were young, bringing them in,
Mm-hmm.
like, do not miss out on the fact that they are your core, and
Yeah.
that is where your momentum is going to come from.
Yeah.
Is getting that core young families ingrained in your church.
And unleash them, right?
Yeah,
Like hand things off to them.
pass the keys.
Real ministry possibilities, real leadership opportunity.
And mentorship and all of those
Mentorship,
things.
Yeah.
And this is funny. We keep going the generation route because
Yeah.
the third trend is Gen Z will start to reshape the church.
Yeah. Okay. So how will they reshape the church differently than millennials?
I think there's some similarities between the millennials and Gen Z. Talking back to your Catholic
Yeah. Yeah.
stories and their millennials' desires to connect with the past of
to
the
the
church
age, yeah.
and tradition and all of that. Gen Z will be less produced, 100%. 90s, early 2000s, church was all about production. Non-denominational church was
Yep,
all about
yep.
production, the
Excellent.
lighting.
Make it excellent.
We got to make it excellent. We got to guitar riff, and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of
yeah.
those things. Got to have the flashing lights, movers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
shakers. They don't care about that. They don't care about that, and they really care more about it being heart-driven.
Mm.
So they're less head-driven, and they're way
Yeah.
more heart-driven.
Well, I feel put out to pasture by that comment.
I'm sorry, Rick. We
But-
still need it.
Okay.
We still need it.
Yeah. So if there was an overemphasis on making sure you had doctrinal correctness, that can't go away, because the truth of Jesus has to be maintained against its competitors and false versions. But what I hear in this is that Gen Z is going to demand a connection to the heart. They're going to demand that the emotional connection we have, which, by the way, how is this not part of the inheritance of the gospel?
Right.
Not only the truth of the saving work of Jesus, but the promise of the Holy Spirit. This is unbelievably experiential, right? You can't read the New Testament and say, well, this is an intellectual conversion I've had, and all my ideas have changed, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think
That's not it. That's not the full meal deal.
And I think that for you just said, I feel put out to pasture a little bit by this, because we know you're a head guy. You're really apologetics. But I think there's still a place for that. While they might be less head-driven and more heart-driven, that there's going to be a need for that following up. So maybe maybe for them, it's not so much that's how they get there,
right?
But rather that's how they sustain.
Yeah, that's good.
And so
I like that.
me, this really was spoken to me very clearly, Rick, through one of our friends, Stephen Walker.
Oh, yeah.
He's a Gen Zer, and we know him, and man, he has heart for Jesus.
Yes, he
like,
does.
he just loves Jesus. He went to Passion Conference.
Yeah.
He flew himself
Yeah.
to
On his own dime, just said, I'm going to go worship Jesus with a bunch of Gen Z for 4 days. Yeah.
And just his passion when he comes back, funny, passion.
Yeah.
He comes back, he's just super, like, excited about the gospel. And he showed us this video of them just worshiping. And you just see all these Gen Zers.
Yeah. 60,000 in the auditorium.
Yeah, just worshiping. And they have a program.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be, done at a certain point.
And the music was not bad. It was very, very good, in fact.
It was very
So
good.
it's not like it wasn't produced well.
Yeah, it was super produced well. But they just decided, hey, this is a moment.
Yeah.
This is a moment.
And they went off the program.
And they went off the program, and we're just going to worship God together.
Yeah.
Because guess what? We're not going to be performance based. We're not going to be rigid schedule. We're going to say, hey, God, there's room for you in this room, and we're just going to worship. And that's just been outlined over the last 2 years for me through the Ashbury revival to this.
Yeah.
It's just that these Gen Zers are hungry for that. And even more personally, taking us to summer camp at Allen Creek Community Church, seeing our students at summer camp after day 2, just worshiping with their hearts, like, I'm like, man, where was that the whole year?
Yeah.
You know? And it's just a reminder to me that they are just so heart-driven.
Yeah.
And they are so brought into that.
This so illustrates to me just the nature of God, right? God does good things with bad things. And he restores the years the locust has eaten. And he turns deserts into, streams of water and all that kind of stuff. Wouldn't it be something, right, that the Gen Z, the Generation Z, that we label as uniquely broken in some sense, because it is true that they have come from family trauma.
Well, they are the most fatherless generation.
That's what I'm talking about. So that cannot not matter, right? That will have its negative effect and negative. And yet, wouldn't it be just like God to take that generation,
Right.
uniquely beset by that wound, and make them an impetus for revival, for seeking the heart of God, for pressing us into the intimacy of relationship, which is part of our gospel inheritance. And they'll remind us of that.
Well, and it's interesting, Rick, because we talk about this a whole lot as pastors, is that father wounds can often impact how you view God.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yes,
I just wonder if the fatherlessness is a drive for this heart connection. Because they just desire to be known by a loving father.
Yeah.
And so there's just this desire, this thing of, hey, I have experienced fatherlessness in my life, and I just want that.
Yeah.
And then when they experience God's goodness and grace and mercy in their life, the way me and you have, and it's just like, wow, it's a good father who cares deeply about me, isn't afraid to correct me, isn't afraid to, look at me and say, hey, that's a bad thing for you, and I know you think it's a good thing for you, but it's not. And
they just get reparented by the gospel.
Yeah, by the gospel.
Yeah.
And it's just something that's super powerful. And I think that's something that we're going to have to know, is that while they're a fatherless generation, they're going to be super spirit-filled. They're going to be just desiring that heart connection. And with that, similar to millennials being the core of your church, we may have missed them when they were younger. Let's not miss Gen Z.
Yeah.
And Gen Z does not only want a place at your table, but they want to vote at the table.
yeah.
They want something to say at the table.
Yeah.
They want to be able to have input at the table.
Yep.
And I honestly feel that millennials are doing a good job. The millennial leaders that I know, and even our church specifically, is doing a really good job of welcoming that in.
Yeah.
But I know our church is kind of an anomaly. And so
Could be, yeah.
I think that that's really important, that you can't just look at them and say, wow, we're glad you're here.
Right. Right.
We're so glad we have young
Right.
people.
Yeah.
You got to give them a space. You got to
Yeah.
give them an opportunity, especially, you keep the same boundaries. I mean, the doctrine,
Sure,
all of
sure.
those things, but you got to.
But see, on that topic, there might be an opportunity, because if you have a hunger, like you're talking about, though my father and mother reject me, the Lord will receive me. They're hungry for the acceptance of God. That they're also set up then to be reparented by the gospel, but also by older believers.
Yeah.
And so then older believers have
Mentorship.
maybe have that mentorship window that's wider than it was with my generation. Because I can tell you, Gen X, we thought we had the world by the tail. Like, I think we thought we were super competent and didn't necessarily need to be told what to do. Whereas I think Gen Z would be more like, oh, I don't feel competent, so you help me. Right?
Yeah, right.
And then there'll be a much more of an intergenerational connection, and I think that could be only good for the church.
Yeah, well, 100%. And I think you speak to the fatherlessness, right? It's just the mentorship, and I think that's going to be a really good thing. And I think that's the big thing that we have to understand going into 2024, 2025 is these are the core of our church, and we want them to be successful.
Yeah.
And so let's mentor them, let's train them, let's pour into them. And I preached about this, and I said, you know what millennials and Gen Z don't need? They don't need you making fun of them.
Right.
I mean, they have enough of that.
Yeah.
What they need is someone to encourage them and speak life into them and speak wisdom.
Now, we can still have a sense of humor, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can make fun of me. I don't care.
Because we make fun of Gen X being the squeezed out
yeah,
generation,
and millennials. I just whine about everything.
Yeah.
So
right,
I mean, that's normal.
Yeah.
But
no, I get it. To the point of there's a point where ridicule starts to, where fun moves into ridicule, and then you start to feel like you're uniquely, irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think if you're speaking life into somebody, the jokes don't.
Yeah.
It's like, I know how you care about me.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So the other thing he's saying is that another hiccup in church world is that discipleship has a growing digital component. You kind of briefly touched on that with the Zoom groups.
Yep.
How else do you see that happening?
Well, it's so fascinating that this is what he's saying. Discipleship has a growing digital component, meaning that we're going to have to lean in to technology on the discipleship front. So we thought we were way ahead of the curve on this when our core discipleship elective, which we call applications, which kind of takes you through the principles and the habits to love God, love the church, and love the world really, really well. So that to us is the discipleship pathway. When you're doing those loves well, you are a mature follower of Jesus. So how do we do those loves well? That's the material. And it was almost 10 years ago now, Alex, that we got that stuff all digital.
Yeah.
And we put it all out there on the website. And we felt like this was super cool because then it could be done in a group, but also individually.
Yeah.
It could be done in your home.
You have access to
There were so many different ways you could do it. So we still think that's cool, but we have got to figure out a way to combine it with everything else you just said about the fact that Gen Z is hungry for connection, that the millennials are less pressing into the Zoom. They're more ready than boomers sometimes, you said, to say, let's put this device aside because they know how destructive this can be to potential good connections.
So when we talk about discipleship, I think sometimes there's a disconnect between practicing the way of Jesus, thank you, John Mark, and just knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if some of our discipleship that is growing in digital connection is not so much this, because that's going to always be necessary, but the head knowledge stuff. I'm wondering if that's what it's talking about, that there's going to be more of a platform for YouTube channel or
this is where we're going to get the data in because now people are, think about how many people are taking in blogs.
Oh, yeah.
like this, for example.
Yes.
But people are making it part of their thing. They're cruising YouTube at night rather than television shows.
Yeah.
They're saying my favorite channel, my favorite blogger, and that's
Well,
they're
and
getting.
I know so many guys that work in factories who they're just listening to podcasts while they're
all
working.
day. Yeah.
And so I think there's a digital component there of like, hey, let's
This is a huge
Opportunity.
tool. Yeah, a huge opportunity. So I can certainly see that, and so that means that churches have got to be ready to lean into it.
which we're not afraid to do.
Yeah, but I would say that our resource allocation into that has not always been maybe up to snuff.
But we're working on it.
Yep,
We're getting
for
there.
sure.
So this was an interesting one, Rick.
Yeah.
And it's a hot button. I mean, Kerry didn't hold back with this one.
Okay. Yeah.
So he says,
Lay it out.
partisan extremism will continue to fuel short-term church growth, but not long-term church growth. And he's talking political issues.
Yes, and I know what he means here. So he's saying that because we're so polarized politically, that if you pick a side, basically, in the culture war, and really craft your gospel narrative around the niche sensibilities, let's say it like that, of one of the sides, that you could grow in the short term. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
You could actually jump up because you could say you start to play into some of the hot buttons, some of the talking points, but he's saying it's not a good strategy for long-term growth, right? Isn't that his point?
Yeah.
And what's the danger? What's the danger that he lines out in, like, if you just go after that short-term hit because you let's say pandered is the word, we pandered to one particular political niche, you'll suffer.
Yeah, so I think the thing he outlines is right away you've alienated 50%
Yes.
of the population.
As soon as you say our church is a default promotional wing of a particular political party, boom, 50% of everyone is
done.
no longer coming to your church. Yeah.
And that's not good for long-term outreach.
Right.
Like, that's just not good for that. And while it might temporarily boost your attendance, it's not the gospel.
Right.
And I think the other danger, and I didn't see him outline it, but I'm sure he does, is you're preaching a false gospel.
Right, because you're tying salvation to a suite of, let's say, social perspectives. Now, does this mean, Alex, that Kerry would disapprove of churches taking pretty well-defined moral stances on biblical topics of morality that affect politics?
Sure.
Okay, so he would still affirm that, that if churches, for example, affirm, the biblical, emphasis on
Sanctity of
life, the biblical sexual marriage model, these things affect politics.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he's speaking to.
So
I think he's honestly what he's speaking to is endorsing a political candidate.
Right.
Or endorsing a political figure.
Because there's things on the other side of that aisle that are also biblical themes that could ruffle feathers on the other. Like, for example, the biblical emphasis on the universality of human worth, regardless of your skin color. The anti-racism of that beautiful New Testament picture of here there's no longer barbarian, Scythian, slave or free,
or feeding
male,
the poor,
female.
or making sure someone doesn't go hungry.
Yeah, for example, the emphasis on poor people, widows and orphans.
Yeah.
Huge biblical concern, and not necessarily known for, on one side of the political aisle is for being front and center, let's say.
Yeah, sure. And so I would say that he's not saying that you sticking to the biblical core truths is wrong. I think he's saying that if you just endorse only a political party and that's all you talk about,
you'll get a short-term shot in the arm, but you're going to hurt yourself long-term. I can see that for sure.
So that's
I think at AC3, I'm maybe tooting our own horn a little bit, but I feel like we're obviously conservative in our doctrine because we take a great deal
we're a Bible believing church.
We take a great deal of interest in being orthodox. We're not inventing something new here.
Yeah.
We talked about on another blog about translating versus transforming the gospel. So we emphasize that a lot, right? But nevertheless, I think that
well, we've done a really good job of this, and I hope that this is a reminder for us to continue to do a good job.
Yeah.
And I think the reason he brings this up is elections are coming up.
Yep.
And
For
I
sure.
think that's why he says 24, 25.
It's gonna go crazy. Just be prepared.
Just be prepared.
It's gonna go nuts.
It's gonna go nuts, and just be aware that this can cause really high growth for you for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And could really hurt you in the long run, and hurt the kingdom of God in the long run.
For sure.
Number 6, this is gonna shock you.
Okay. Lay it on me.
Prepare. AI adoption is becoming normative in growing churches.
No.
They're gonna kill us, guys.
Skynet is coming.
Skynet. So this isn't shocking to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's shocking to you, but the use of AI becoming
it's the rapid embrace of it. Well, okay, so just personally, AC3, if you came to church in the last couple of weeks, some of the images that were on the screen behind me, I made with AI.
Whoa.
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
You used AI?
I used AI. I just asked it for this or that, and it gave it to me, you know. Among other things, AI is the world's greatest plagiarizer because it just takes a million different images, smashes them together, and gives you the thing you asked for. So it is so good at stealing material.
Well, you do that. And then in youth group, we have a game called AI Charades.
Oh, what's that?
And so one of the kids has to stand with his back to the screen, and the rest of the kids have to act out what's on the screen.
Oh, okay.
And so we had like Ninja Turtles having a tea party.
Oh, nice.
Like just ridiculous things.
Right.
So yeah, AI is being used.
Sweet. So he's saying churches need to be prepared to how fast our uptake on this. In other words, our resistance to this is not going to be, it's going to be low.
The ship has sailed and it's not coming back to port. It's not.
It's terrifying, Alex.
It is. I know for you, this is like.
A little bit.
It's like you're worried.
A little bit. I mean, because so much of gospel life is, it's enfleshed, right? It's a fleshy life. You know, in the best way sense of that term, you know, in the New Testament negative sense, you know, the flesh is the sinful nature. No, I'm talking about creation-friendly fleshy, right? Where God says it is good, and He designed us in nature, and to be stewards of the world, and not a digital world, His world. We're supposed to be, you know. So anyhow, the idea that for me, the terrifying future is Ready Player One. Where basically, we all live in single-wide mobiles and we don't give a crap. And you know why? Because we have a fully digital space that we enter into. We pay a lot of money for it, and it is better than anything that we could ever experience in the quote-unquote real world.
No, I think that's a legitimate fear. And I think AI being used in the church, for him, he's saying it's being adopted more and more.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is AI being used for administrative work, pictures, branding.
Research even.
Research.
Well, branding, speaking of which, AC3 is adopting a new branding portfolio.
Yeah.
And our key picture is beautiful.
It's AI.
It was AI. It was not made by a human. Well, it probably was, but it was mashed by artificial intelligence into the current. That's why we can own it. We can't own that picture if it was some artist that we just rip them up. But what AI does is takes bits and pieces of a bunch of pictures,
puts them together.
Yeah, it's like what you say, right? If it's 3 sources, it's research. If it's 1 source, it's plagiarism.
Oh my gosh.
So AI is I guess a great researcher.
And so one thing that I think is important is to know that is that in 2024, authenticity is far from overdone, and it will become a superpower. So authenticity will become a superpower. And the ability to distill meaning amid the AI madness will become more critical than ever.
Got it. Okay, so he is warning us that if the uptake of AI is so fast, that the hunger, again, like you're saying, for authenticity, real relationships, visceral, human, even physical connection is actually going up. And so the church will fill that niche in the market in some sense, right?
Yeah.
People just said, people are going to be hungry for this, and guess what? We'll be sort of like the ancient people over here that, you know,
we like to meet together.
Do it real, yeah.
I like a good taco soup over, you know, with you.
We meet together.
Yeah, meet together, break bread together.
Like radical things.
And I think that's a huge thing. And then the last thing he says is this, and it's super interesting. I don't even know what to think of it. And it's that a new kind of megachurch pastor will continue to emerge.
Yeah, and so what did he say about that? I didn't scan that part carefully. He means that pastors over the super big churches, so just so everyone knows, mega church is any church over 1,000. So what is this new kind of pastor he's talking about?
Yeah, so the new generation of megachurch pastor, which a big church, you just kind of outlined, 1,000 plus people, is going to be less interested in popularity and platform, and they're going to be more interested in local ministry that you probably can't even name 5 of them.
Oh, wow. So he's talking, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
As far as he's concerned. So
Yeah.
This new kind of megachurch. So the old kind of megachurch would have been
It's the Craig Rochelle.
the
I love him,
brand,
but it's that.
the brand, the look, the popularity, the uptake of content.
The Elevation Church model, the Willow Creek's old model.
Yeah. All our content is everywhere. Everyone leans on us for their stuff, for worship songs, for sermon material, for new exciting strategies. And you're saying that's changing.
He's saying that the thing that's going to bring people, that's going to make the megachurch a megachurch, is that these pastors are going to be way more interested in how are we impacting our community than how am I being elevated. And it's such a good thing, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, that is the epitome of the gospel. And I think it kind of goes off the heels of the de-churching, where so many young people were struggling with the idea of these pastors having these platforms and then just falling.
Right.
And just struggling. And so...
Okay, so here's my question. How can you be that kind of leader and lead a megachurch?
Right.
Aren't those almost at cross purposes potentially?
Could they be?
You know what I'm saying? Like a heavy focus on authenticity, you're saying.
Yep.
And a focus on local mission. And you're saying that's a new megachurch pastor model. Well, as far as I'm concerned, great, hallelujah. But
it's happening quietly.
Can a church be a technical megachurch, i.e., it's got 1,000 plus on that model, or does that model itself militate against growth that big because it's got an emphasis on on authenticity, on relationship, on connection, which are much harder in really, really big churches?
So, yes, I think it's possible, mainly because I've read it in the book of Acts.
Boom!
And so, in the book of Acts, you see 5,000 people. They're gathering
There's
together.
mega church.
They're doing church. They're doing life together. And I think the reason it becomes mega church is everything we just said before this, is that the younger generation is just desiring, hungering for authenticity. And so the reason that it's going to be a mega church is not because they have all the answers. The reason it's going to be a mega church is because they're going to come to somebody who's authentically trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're trying to show everyone else how to do that, and that they're much more concerned about, less about the followers they have and more about the ministry that they're accomplishing. And I don't think he's saying they're going to stop being laser focused. I don't think any of that. I think it's just it's that the hunger has shifted.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing.
All right, AC3. So there you go. 7 trends that are going to affect the church in the next little while. And some good news there is just that if it was about finding the secret sauce, the secret formula, then it was like you either have it or you don't. You're either smart enough or you're not. But things like authenticity.
Turns out it's just the gospel.
Yeah, right.
Crazy.
Handing over leadership to the next generation. Well, these are all simple and overt scriptural principles that should be baked into the culture of every church, right? That we should be handing off leadership. We should be welcoming people up into the community. We should be real, because any community that believes that we're sinners saved by grace, well, it's time to take the masks off.
Turns out we're sinners.
Yeah.
And we're saved by
grace. It's about time to get real. So, all right, AC3. So there we go, and let's continue to pray.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you have any thoughts about these things impacting our society and our world, we would love to hear from you. If you're another church leader, we'd love to connect with you, and maybe you would love to discuss these things with us.
Yeah, super. We'll connect with you. Until next time, we'll see you here on Fireside Chat.